as I mentioned before, my position is not just the authority, but we also have other authorities in the ministry. What I'm going to do now is actually dive into a program that is being led by another authority that we have, the youth authority that I mentioned before, but it is related completely to the 550 plan. As Jonathan mentioned before, their authority is mostly integrator. They have a few programs, but this one is being led by the youth authority. For us, it was a very good synchronizing until the moment. I mean, if the next government will rip off the different authorities, it will make it more complex. But as we saw it, it was something that completely works together, and it was better for us to have this authority that will represent their program. But this is uncertainties that we're gonna encounter too. So if you think about the youth themselves, I assume you had Nasrin yesterday, Nasrin Khadifia. She's a good friend, and she's a really brilliant young researcher. A lot of this was based originally on her PhD about the inactivity of the Arab youth. So if you can see, most of the, and again, I'm putting the Haredi, the ultra-Orthodox issue aside, because it's a completely, we also deal with it, but it's more than a day to talk about. But if you look at the Jews that are not ultra-Orthodox, most of them eventually going to some kind of a framework after the high schools, many of them to the army, some of them to the gap year program that we have in Israel, Shnot Shirut, if you know, and the Mechinot Gam Tzvayot, the pure army academies. However, the art society is something that is completely not in their knowledge. I mean, it's completely not part of the cultural DNA. In one hand, we have almost, we'll see it later, but almost a third of the art sector today is young. I mean, it's between 18 to 25 years old, 30% of them from all the art sector. In the same time, many of them, and women a little bit more, as you can see here, are considered inactive. Inactive means, I assume that you know the term, but it means eventually that it's a person that is not certain of what he wants to do with his life. He doesn't have a right sense of direction where he want to go. And many times in the extreme positions of this, it can lead to violence, it can lead to other issues. But I must say that it's not the main thing. It's not the main thing of the program. I mean, because I heard that there was also a gap of understanding between what's the meaning of the program. I would say that the program doesn't aim on the, I would say, the margin youth that is a youth that prone to violence, active or whatever. We're talking, and we'll see later, about most of the youth. That a lot of it is inactive, and some of it can lead to violence. But this is not the main thing. It's important to say because I heard some things yesterday. So you read the things. I would just say it's quite obvious that there is a strong correlation between the income and the inactiveness of youth, the parents' education, the residential areas, it's more in the south, a little bit less in the north. I'm talking about our sector. And also very connected in Israel with this to religion, mostly because of the culture reason that we know. In Israel, at least, if you look at a young Jewish girl or boy, I'm doing it very rapidly, they have a very clear path. I mean, they go to the school. They're already in the 11th grade. They're starting to spin themselves either to the army or either to have a gap year. Today, gap years, I was a CEO of NGOs, and I had a few gap years that we were running. You have to understand that for each position in the amended ones, you can have 100 places for one person, 100 for each place, 100 people are trying to apply. So it's something that they know they want to affirm, they want to achieve. They already planning their life, sometimes in the age of 12, 13, and 14 on what they should do, what they should volunteer in order to get to this gap year, in order to get to a good place in the army or whatever. This is like a typical Jewish, let's say from the middle socioeconomical sphere. It's very clear for them. They know what they want to do, and they have the emotional and cultural support to have it from their parents, from their society, from NGOs and youth movements. And this is if you think about the typical Israeli girl or boy, this is how they live. It's completely different in the art sector. I mean, now when I'm saying the art sector, you know, the Druze, Cherkess, Bedouins, I'm saying something very from the viewpoint of the bird. But I would say that many of them are not raising like that at all. I mean, in the first years in my former hat, when I met this youth and asked them why you want to join our program, most of them, I must say, didn't want to join. 95% of them didn't know about it, they didn't care about it, they didn't understand what would come out of it. But if you ask them why they want to do it, many of the reasons you would assume are not the reason we are assumed, and some of them are very basic. We want to know better Hebrew because we didn't have the opportunity, and we want to have Jewish friends in order to be better in our economical life or whatever. And we eventually identified this 18 to 19. So just when we had surveys before we started to work on the program, the knowledge of the idea of the possibility to go to something similar to the gap year, 70% of our youth were not even aware of disability. And if you go to the numbers, 87% of them are not in any service framework. Okay, this is we can see this in a graph. That's what I understand. It's not. I think it's quite obvious. People who ever knows Israel understands it. But while the non-Orthodox Jews, most of them still going to military service or national service, the opposite is with our sector. And the issue here for us at least is not saying that the program should go to the army. It's a political discussion on other issues, but we say that only 13 of them are using this to go to another framework. 9% of it is a national civic service. It has a lot of, I will not get into it now, lots of tension between it's not easy for them to decide to go there. Most of the people who are going there are women. And these women many times are going to very local kind of volunteering. The national service is mostly volunteering, and that's leadership development. And many times when they do that, eventually it doesn't, when we look at the individual, it doesn't help them get out of the local culture that they are in. And we know that most of, as I mentioned, the girls, they are not going to academics, so they're not going to other higher education or better jobs. We go back to the usually business, and 4%, which is a small amount, are going to the military service. Maybe you were part of, some of the were part of the institutions being led by the Institute of Education. That's what I understand. It's a leadership program aimed on the excellent part of the Arab youth. And unfortunately, today only 3% are taking it. So it's something that was implemented 2 years ago. So we know it's something that didn't catch at least in a wider scale. Also, we're talking about a very specific part of the art sector, which is the ones that we see that they have high potential to become academics. And this is the only main art program we are. We have to understand that when we meet these young ones, usually and unfortunately, when I was working with them for more than 10 years from the field, even when we try to offer new programs, the sense of unentitlement that there are no deserves to have, that there are some money offering them, they probably will not sit, are very strong. Also, in these stages, the family still, in spite of having very differences between the generations, still the young generation feels very obliged to what the family expects them to do. They don't understand why you offer them to go to a program that doesn't give them anything. Because eventually these programs, they don't give you a title and they don't give you money. And the first question is, are you offering me a job? Are you offering something else? If not that, not that. In the art sector, the one issue that we don't know how to approach and they go to the families. And many times I remember in my former house, I had to explain to the parents and to persuade the parents when I want to take their kids for 1 year in order to do something that doesn't give them. My example is a very big question. Why in the Jewish mostly, let's say, middle class and upper class, it's not a question at all. I mean, they have some support. They can go for this year. They know that this gap year gives them a lot for the future. And there's no question about it. They found about it. We find to get inside. And in the art center, it's completely the opposite. And also, we can't ignore the political context. I mean, we can try to put it aside, but they see the news, they know what's going on, and everything, not everything, and many times the things that there, like government, represent them many other things that they don't want to be related to, and it's making it even harder to persuade them to go, even if we think something just made for them. I would say a few challenges about the gap year program that we encounter. This is the last point. The political changes and the changes that we have now make it hard for us to be in the position that, on one hand, we don't want to be just a technical educator program, because then it doesn't serve what we believe that is a problem. Dealing with your identity, your relation, your abilities, you believe in yourself. And on the other hand, dealing with identity in such a complex environment, I can say in the last year, so many organizations and so many politicians put a light on this program and question us from the right and the left, and the newspaper and the program didn't even get out yet. Yeah? So you understand how much political attention there is about a program that wants to educate the youth about identity. So it's a tension that we live in. The dangerous place that I'm afraid that we will get to as a government, it will be that we don't want to deal with any of these things, and then it will be just a technical kind of a program, and then we will use the essence of it. There's also tension with other gap year programs we mentioned before, the national service and others. There's a question of shared society. I will look at that for a second. I will say this: the term shared society is being used a lot here. If you look at the 550 program, I'm taking away for a second from the gap year. And the percentage being invested in shared year is close to nothing. And we have to understand. And even here, I'm saying it, I mean, we can discuss if it's good or not, but let's understand. For the moment, the focus is completely on the Arab sector. It's not about the Arab and the Jewish sector. It's about the Arab sector. And same here. I mean, these programs are not aimed for the fair society. We need to find, for the moment, programs that are working together, Jews and Arab, living together, whatever. And they are separate, they are focused on the art as a whole. And this is this situation needs to be, in my opinion, needs to be taken care of or being looked at more carefully. Also reaching an appropriate audience, so we'll talk in a second. And also the relationship between the philanthropy and the finance sector, I would say, because this is a very delicate dance. I would say that there are a few funds that are really connected to the gap year program. Specifically, as the head of the authority said, we had a honeymoon time, and now we're not in the divorce. But let's say that happy times between us, and I know there's a lot of tension. So it's important to go to learn how to be wrong about it. This is also an issue that needs to be taken care of for many reasons, different expectations, different rhythm. It's very, very slow. We have this morning that I was sure that I will show you the schedule that we were supposed to finally sign the agreement and go for this program. It's got stuck again. We're not getting into the details. So, and for the philanthropy, I was sure that the program is running a year. So, and this is the big difference. Just to understand, it's really engaging, but the focus that we have is the youth that either finished, I mean, at least the margin of it that's finished only 10 years of study, but most of it is focused on the people who finished 12 years of study. Oh, okay. So if it's a program as mentioned before, because the violence was talked about as well, we're not aiming to if you take the Gauss, we focusing mostly on the main a common Arab girl or a boy here, and not the ones that are very exceptional or the ones who are prone to to violence or other things. This is the current status of the gap year program, more or less. The last year was a long year, working on how it should look like, what's the framework, how it's going to operate. I was hoping today that the signing will be behind of us. It's not. Working back at home about it, but I do believe that it will be signed until the end of the year. And then more or less, we believe that the first participants will show up in close to the summer. This is more or less what we going to have. It's been delayed in a year. I mean, when I got to the ministry, we were hoping that in this October we will have participants already. But this is the schedule, the current schedule that we see. Another thing, in one hand, the gap year program is the flagship of the 550 regarding to the leadership programs. But in the same time, if you look at the numbers are not creating a complete change, and it needs to be on the table. I mean, as we know, every calendar year, more or less, you have between 35 to 40,000 Arab youth. And we here will get in the fifth year, more or less to 1,400. You can do the numbers. Obviously, there are you can reduce many of the from the 35 to 40,000 for a different reason. You understand that we have between 15,000 to 20,000 that are relevant to this program. So it will be more or less between 10 to 15% only from the people trying to approach. It's a challenge. Some of it is because yes, sir.
Is that 100% of the youth?
That's 100% of the Arab youth. Not the Israeli one, not the Jewish Israeli ones.
It's not the, so we're talking about the needs are 35% of the 40,000.
Roughly, yeah, exactly. I'm saying that in order to understand, first of all, as we see the program, it's a program that we put a lot of money and effort to make it right. If I'll have time, I'll get into details, but it's not scaled up enough. And this is something that also philanthropy can be participate on later on, and we have other thoughts about it. I will not get into details, but this is just to understand the numbers. Okay, I will not the main points because I'm thinking about time. The model that we try to build is a model that is flexible enough to work with the third sector, but still have a core center that we developed and we insist on. And the point is, when we went and checked and learned, for example, the pre-army academies, if you're familiar with them, the pre-army academies started the opposite. I mean, they started from bottom up. I mean, there are many different NGOs, each one had his own idea, and slowly they gathered together and they managed to create a lobby, to create a law, and then they are supported by the government. But there's no central, and later, very later on, there was kind of an NGO that overseeing these different pre-army academies. Here, we try to do the opposite, to create a core, and this is when we joined the joint is the core operator of us, the headquarters of it, that will have with us and the philanthropy, will define what are our basic needs, what are our basic goals, and then we'll go to call for proposal for NGOs that will submit proposal to us. So they will be flexible enough, knowing how to work with their specific groups and specific people from the Arab sector, but we have to follow these main principles. This is a little different than what's going on today in Israel in the informal education. Let me see if there's something else that is important here. No. Okay, it's important to say that there are two, I'll jump this as well, but very, very roughly, I will not get into the details themselves. As we see, the program will be for 10 months. It's quite similar to the Jewish ones. The first 4 months will be mostly building capabilities as a group, as individuals. And then more or less there will be a decision point to direct the kids, they're not kids anymore, the participants, either to academy, and then we have lots of programs supporting tools to give them, or either to go to the professional path, But not when I'm saying professional path, it's not going to be a maintenance person, which is personally no problem about it. But I'm saying a high profile and professional path that it doesn't go to academics. This is more or less the two options. But in the same time, they will always have this hope to go to, I mean, even really home as an educator, that would have the same guy or girl counselor that works with them on their leadership skills, but each one of them will be directed. This is very, I will not get into these details. This is very rapid. Let's see if there's okay, no, we talked about that. So this is very, from the bird's view, more or less of the program that how we see it. And I will open it up for a question if there is about this specific program.